Okay, I'm back. So we talked about Milan and then 2 days in Alba. And so now we'll talk about Friday. Friday was my third night staying here on site, just again outside of the historic city of Alba in northwest Italy. And this was an exciting day because this was my first winery visit. I had spent a few days in town learning about culture, a bit about food, and now I'm diving headfirst into wine. My visit for the day was at this winery called Michele Chiarlo. They're quite a big producer around here, but they've been making wine for a long time, since I think the late 50s, early 60s. Michele Chiarlo was the man who started the winery and actually just recently in 2023 passed it on to his sons. So big producer, but good quality wine and family owned, which is always something near and dear to my heart as someone who works at a family business. So I'm excited for this winery. I'm excited to get into wine country. Piedmont is very hilly. That's actually where the name comes from. Pied means hills in Italian. And Alba is at the bottom of like a valley, basically. On either side, there are hills and there are wineries and vines on all of the land that they can legally be on. But Alba itself is kind of tucked away. And spending days in Alba, I've kind of been tucked away from the vineyards. Now, my visit is at 1 p.m. and I woke up again a little bit late and kind of slow moving, but I knew I wanted to get some stuff done here as far as booking a stay in Barbaresco, which will be the town I'm going to next. So I needed to get that done. I needed to edit my first video like this. And so I just had some housekeeping things I needed to do aside from laundry, which I had done yesterday. So I wake up, go down to the little restaurant down here. For breakfast, they just have pastries. And so I was like, great, I'll have a cappuccino and a pastry. I'll get my work done. And then I'll come back up here, change, and go to the winery. And the winery is about 20 minutes away. I go down there and everything takes longer. The place I was going to book originally is 3 miles further away from Barbaresco than I thought, and I wanted to be in the center, and so I had to figure that out, and the editing took a long time, and just kind of anything that could go wrong did go wrong, including they were all sold out of pastries. And so I just had due cappuccini for breakfast, which is not enough for me, but I just had to make do. And then I did all this stuff, and now I'm running late. So I only have I think I left here at 12:20, and it's a 20-minute drive, right? So I have 20 minutes to find somewhere to eat and then find my way in this place I've never been before. So run back up here, change, jump in the car, drive down and pull over responsibly, look up food near me, and there's a restaurant like a few blocks away. Perfect. And it says fast dining. Great. So I jump in the car, miss my turn, of course. I'm on borrowed time here. Go in, and it's kind of a weird looking building, but okay. And I walk in, and basically there's this little stand outside of a public pool. So all these people are coming in their swimming trunks, goggles, ready to get some laps in. And I'm like, I'm here for the food. And so I go over in the corner and I look at the menu and I see panino con pollo, sandwich with chicken. Perfect. And I said, un panino con pollo. And she gets it out, and this is like not Italian food. This is like McDonald's chicken sandwich, but like more like it's like just a chicken patty like you would have in elementary school. And I was bummed because like I wanted to, be eating authentic food, but I really had no time to negotiate. So I'm like, see the sandwich, and I go, two of those. And she says, 2, and you want a coffee? And yes. And so she heats these up in like a convection oven, basically. And it took forever, but she was like the sweetest Italian old lady. And so I'm not trying to rush her, but I'm like watching my watch tick by, like, okay, I need to leave in the next 5 minutes or I'm going to be late. Finally, the sandwiches are done. The espresso is done. I take the espresso and the sandwiches in a bag, and I jump in the car and I start gunning it. And you basically, what I did is drive, and then you turn towards the hills, and then you just drive straight up the hill. And it is the craziest climb that I've ever had in my life. Nothing in Colorado touches the steepness of these hills, or of these roads up the hill. They just go pretty much straight up. And they're one lane, and there's like little tiny spots to pull off if there's a car coming down. But it's all like so steep. Like the aspect of these hills is crazy, which is part of why they're so good for growing Nebbiolo. So I'm like, please God, don't make me have to pull off, because I'm thinking I'm in like a mom car with like a decently high center of gravity. I'm thinking I pull off for a car and I roll down the hill. And these are honestly more like almost mountains. Honestly, it's like the elevation change is so crazy. You're going from like 50 feet above sea level to, you know, hundreds and hundreds of, maybe if not 1,000 feet above sea level, and it's straight up. Anyways, so I'm just like taking these tiny roads, like literally I have clearance like maybe 6 inches on either side of my tires, and I'm like white knuckling, driving straight up. It's so tall that I'm worried that I'm not even like, my car is gonna like stall out and I'm gonna fall backwards, but it didn't happen. But as I'm driving, the vineyards start to unveil themselves as I get a little altitude. And you just see, it looks like fingers across every hill, all Nebbiolo, all being grown here where I was at for Barolo. It was stunning. And so not only am I on this tiny road going straight up, but I'm also trying not to look too much so I don't, again, end up crashing my car and potentially dying and certainly ruining, you know, a vintage of Barolo for these small producers. And I kind of come around and I like am stopped dead in my tracks. It says take a sharp left turn, which was sharp. I almost had to 3-point it on the side of this mountain. And there's the most beautiful city I've seen in my whole life, just sitting on top of this hill. Old architecture, tower going up. And I literally said, well, what is that? And I was like, no time. And so I go and I keep driving, and I kind of come around down. And as I'm driving down, what meets me coming up but a tractor? I'm like, oh my God, my car can barely fit. How in the world is a tractor going to fit? And so I go to the pull off, and I'm kind of like inching my way as far off the road as I can without assuredly flipping my car down the hill. And I just barely get off the road, and this tractor comes by. Wave at the guy. He's pulling behind him a trailer with some other machines on it. And I literally think he's just going to scrape my whole car. And he just barely misses me. He goes on his way. I go down a little bit, shoot straight back up, and then boom, I'm at Michele Chiarlo's resort. And I pull up and I see these buildings, and here I am, Michele Chiarlo Cerrecchio. And Cerrecchio is the little region, or like the kind of the hillside that they're growing the grapes on for their Cerrecchio Barolo. And their tasting room is kind of on top of the vineyards. So by Italian law, you can only plant Nebbiolo between certain longitude lines. And so every vineyard cuts off at the same level on the hillside. And part of that is because of the law, but part of that is because of erosion. At the top of these hills, all the soil erodes down. So at the very top, they're not as good for vines. Past that line, there sits this little villa, basically. And actually, the villa, it is their tasting room, but it's also a little resort. So you can stay on site, and it's very, very beautiful. And so I pull up, it's like 1:01, so I'm 1 minute late, which is doable. And I don't know where I'm going. I just kind of park where other cars are. And I'm in my car kind of getting my affairs in order. And a little golf cart pulls up, and there's this cheery Italian man. And he says, "Are you here for the tasting?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Get in." So I lock up my car, jump in the golf cart, and we go up to the kind of the top area where the main building sits. First thing we do, introduces himself. His name is Gabriele, and very, very kind man from the jump. And he takes me to this little overlook, and we look at the valley. We talk about La Morra, and which I learned is that village that I was distracted by, the most beautiful village I've seen, perched on top of a hill. Talked about La Morra. We talked about the Langhe, which is the greater region of Piedmont that we're in, and Barolo, Nebbiolo. He kind of gives me the whole rundown, which some of the stuff I knew, but to hear these things in the place that it's all taking place is a totally different experience. And so I was like a kid in a candy store asking questions. And then we go into their wine shop, which is also sort of like a cellar. And it's really beautiful. I have videos of it and I'll post those as well. But basically this building is the old stable for the farm animals of the farm. And this property dates back to the mid 1700s, and a noble family lived there. And so, which my understanding is that if you're a noble family, that means someone in your family is in the Catholic Church, which is cool. Big fan of Catholicism. I'm culturally Catholic, of course. Just the history was so fun. And so we kind of do a tour of the wine that they have for sale. And one cool thing is that they're selling some of their back vintage stuff, which is really, really fun. And then we go into this second room. Also, an important thing is it's a cellar, so it's cold. I mean, it's like 60 degrees in there. I was like in heaven. We go to the second room and there's tasting set up. And basically, it's just me and Gabriele. And he just says, what do you want to taste? And so I said, I'll taste through anything. And I kind of pointed out the stuff that we have in the market. And I was like, we have some of these on our bottle list. And so I'm not as interested in these. And he says, I know what to do. And so we start this tasting, and basically it's just a conversation. It was as though two friends were hanging out, but it's this man I just met. And we started with, we drank all single vineyard wines, which is really cool. And for those who don't know, single vineyard is basically a sort of higher delineation for quality of wine. And it's insurance that all of the grapes for this wine come from one specific vineyard. So you're not mixing grapes or juice in from other vineyards in different parts, like very specific, kind of like a baseline of quality for the wine. And so we start with single vineyard Gavi, which is a white wine made from Cortese is the grape. I'm a big fan of Gavi, but I've never had single vineyard expression. It was beautiful. And it was kind of a new take on Gavi where they treat it almost a little bit more like Chardonnay, and it really sang out of the glass. I was a huge fan. Then we moved to Barbera, which is a grape I love. Very much gets overlooked at times. But a single vineyard Barbera from a region I had never heard of. I didn't know that they were growing Barbera there. And it was outstanding, honestly. And so that was fun. And then we did 2 tastings of Barbaresco and 3 tastings of Barolo. And again, these are all single vineyard, high tier. And he was only pouring me the 2021, which was a very good vintage in this part of Italy. So it's great wine for a good year. And we're comparing and contrasting Barbaresco from 2 different vineyards, same year, totally different expressions. The first one almost tasted like Campari. It was bitter orange peel. It was wormwood and woody, very delicious. The second one from a same grape, same clone probably, but grown in just a different vineyard, was a little bit heavier, definitely more fruit forward, still really delicious, but just the contrast between those two. And then we got into the Barolos. So where we were in Cerrecchio is in Barolo. The wine produced there is under the name Barolo. Their Barolo DOCG, which is basically a list of rules from the government they have to follow in order to have the seal of approval from the government. Barbaresco and Barolo are 2 different regions in Piedmont, and they grow the same grape, Nebbiolo, but the expression is totally different. And that comes down to the soil, that comes down to sun exposure. And it really is a beautiful part of wine where you can have the same grapes grown, a few miles away, and it's totally different expression. So we got into Barolo. We started with the Canubi vineyard, which is this, very, very expensive, decadent, high quality vineyard. It was an excellent expression. Really enjoyed it. Very powerful, very tannic, good balance. And that was great. And that's one of the wines they're sort of known from is their Canubi. And then we tasted 2 of their Cerrecchio, which is, of course, the place that we're at. So these wines, these Barolos, were made from the grapes that we just walked amongst, right? We tasted the 2021, which of course was a good year, and that was delicious. And then he brought out the 2019 Reserva. And so basically what Reserva is another layer of government rules in order to produce the highest tier from Barolo. So there's Barolo and then there's Barolo Reserva. And the requirements are, everything that you need to make a proper Barolo and then some. So even so much as though they limit how many grapes you can harvest from a vineyard in order to have it be Reserva, because they want to make sure it's the best grapes from the best vines. And it's sort of up to the vineyards to decide when they're going to produce a wine under the Reserva label. So they will treat the vines and the grapes as if they could be Reserva in these vineyards, regardless of the quality of the year growth. And then at the end, it's as long as they meet all the requirements the government gives them, then they decide, do we put Reserva on it or not? And so basically, if they follow the rules, it's up to the winemaker to decide if this wine is worthy of the guarantee of Reserva. And when you see Reserva on a bottle of Barolo, you know that it's seeing extra age in oak, it's seeing extra age in barrel. You're only getting the finest grapes from the vineyard. Also, it's up to the winemaker to decide if it's worth putting their name on it. And so many years, these winemakers will have these vineyards that they're preparing for Reserva status, and the wine's just not good enough. So they take that wine, they mix it back into the regular Barolo, and they sell it that way. So since 1988, which is when Michele Chiarlo took ownership of the vineyard that we were on, they have only produced 6 wines labeled Reserva. So only 6 times had the wine been of high enough quality at the end of the required aging period that the winemakers said, we're going to put our guarantee that this is some of the best wine we've ever produced. And Gabriele picked the 2019 Cerrecchio Reserva Barolo, and we tasted that. And that wine was exceptional. It was sometimes the best wines, I always think of, they dance on your palate. It's almost like a ballet. This wine started with acidity, and then the fruit came in, and then the woodiness, and then the tannins just sneak in, and all of a sudden your mouth is fully dry. And the finish, how long you can taste the wine after you take a sip, the wine just sits on your palate. You're tasting it for minutes. And I just fell in love with that wine. It's quite expensive wine, but rightfully so. Sometimes people ask me, why is a wine worth $250, right? Or $300 or $1,000? And sometimes it's hard to answer that question, right? Well, people really like it, or, they don't make a ton of it. But Barolo Reserva from a reputable winery is always worth the money, because you have these winemakers who have been making wine for decades, and they're putting their seal of approval saying, this is the best wine we've produced in a long time. And it was such a great experience to enjoy that wine. And talking with Gabriele, so fun. And so as we kind of wrapped up, I had said, he's like, what are you doing? And so, I'm trying to do interviews. And he said, well, we've got time. We want to sit down and talk. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. I didn't think you would be able to. And he said, oh, I've got time. He said, I don't have anything to do until 5. And so I set up the tripod, I put the microphones on us, and we're just sitting at the table. We did the tasting, and we recorded 50 minutes. And honestly, I was not a good interviewer. I did a lot of, yeah, and kind of fake laughing. It wasn't fake, but it comes across as fake, whatever. But Gabriele is so authentic. He is so good on camera. Just this man sings on camera. It was phenomenal. So my input isn't great on the interview. His answers are amazing. His stories growing up in the Langhe, amongst the vines, what COVID was like. So go check out that interview. I'm going to try and put timestamps, so if there's something that interests you, you can just click right to it. But I really had the best time interviewing this guy. And so we wrap up our 50-minute interview, and he says goodbye. He has to go do another tasting and leaves me, and I kind of button up my stuff, take a few more videos, and I jump back in the car, and I'm heading back down the hill, and I see La Morra, and I said, I'm going to La Morra. So I haven't had dinner, and so I drive up, and I park my car, and I walk up. This city is up, right? Morra sits on the very top of like the tallest hill. And so I'm walking up and I find this restaurant and the doors close and there's a sign and I translate it. It says, go up the back stairs. And I go up the back stairs and I have some very delicious food. And I'm sitting next to these two guys and they go to pay their bill and they're speaking English. And so I say, where are you from? And they said they're from Ecuador. And so we talked, and I talked to these two guys for maybe half an hour. We just shared stories and talked about the differences between where we live and the similarities. And I had such a good time with them. And they said, are you going to the wine event later? And I said, what wine event? And there's a release party for the 2022 vintage for Barolo. And basically a bunch of winemakers are in town and they did a press release and then there's a big party. And I said, I'm going now. And so I keep going up the hill, and at the very top of the hill is a square, and that's where the church is, and there's a lookout over Piedmont, and it's one of the most beautiful sights I've seen in my entire life. So I'm just taken aback by the sights, and it's kind of funny. They have all these bottles of Barolo lined up. I actually didn't end up tasting any of them because you basically buy a wine glass, and then you can have so many glasses of wine. And as much as I wanted to enjoy the 2022 vintage of Barolo on the release date, I could not have a sip of alcohol and make it down that mountain. So I said, it kills me, but I'm not going to have any alcohol. I'm going to be responsible. And so I hang out there, take some videos. I'll do a video on it. And then I kind of explore Morra a little bit, and sun is setting. I meet this very sweet couple from the Netherlands and we talk and exchange Instagrams, like just such a perfect, beautiful day, right? And so I meet this couple. We're standing on the historic wall that goes around Morra, kind of looking out over the vineyards. Again, it looks like just rows, like fingers all the way across the valley as far as the eye can see. Just seriously one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And I've taken a bunch of pictures and I go to take one more picture and I grab my camera out of my backpack and it's about this far off the ground and falls on the ground. I'm like, oh, no big deal. Pop the lens cap off, my lens, visual aid. And what am I met with? But a cracked lens. And just all of the wind was pulled out of my sail. And it wasn't a very far drop, but the road that's on top of the hill is made of all these ancient rocks. And so just a fluke accident, the lens cap was on, but it hit on the right rock and just popped the glass. And so I'm like trying to talk to myself like, it's okay, buddy, maybe it still works. And I take a picture. All you can see are the blurs from the cracks. And I'm like, oh, like this lens, I love this lens. I bought it specifically for the trip. It's, has a really low aperture size and it just was taking such good pictures. I mean, this is the lens I recorded the first videos on, right? And so now what am I going to do? And so I just am like defeated. I'm bummed. I spend some time sulking in Morra and then the sun starts to set and I'm like, I got to get home. So I kind of run to my car and I end up like driving in the dark and missing literally 20 turns. People are passing me. They're honking at me, cussing me out, and I'm just bummed out. And I get back to here. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like I start looking for other lenses and it's like, to replace the lens is money, right? Like to buy a new maybe is $600 or, 500 euros or whatever. But then there's also the fact of like, I don't have an address here. How am I going to ship a lens to me? And plus I'm going to be doing cool stuff tomorrow. I need this lens to take the pictures. And it does sound dramatic, but if you have a camera, you know that like the other lens that I have is a portrait lens. So it's really zoomed in. So you can't really take wide angle shots of people or like tons of people or the vineyards, right? Everything is kind of cropped in. And so I go to bed. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, right? It's more money than I wanted to spend. And on top of that, like I'm just bummed. And on top of that, it's also the inconvenience of like, where the hell am I going to find another camera lens? And so eventually I just end up coming back here. I go to bed kind of defeated, like such a high moment, such a great day of like doing my first interview, which is sort of what I want to do in wine, right? Record people's stories and share them with you all. And then, so I'm riding high and I'm in the most beautiful town. I'm literally like, you're going to have to go on my Instagram and look at the pictures I took before the broken lens. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen some beautiful places, just in America, I suppose. High, like literally high, on top of a mountain, looking out over just vineyards as far as the eye can see. And then low of like, what am I going to do? You know, I need this lens to record these videos, and that's part of why I'm on this trip, right? And so I end up going to sleep and just, you know what, we'll worry about it tomorrow. I'm sure we'll figure it out. Yeah, so that was Friday night, and Saturday morning I was really excited. I was going to go to the Alba market, and apparently tons of people come in, and it would have been really good to have a wide angle lens to take big pictures of all these people. But I just went to bed and said, we'll figure it out tomorrow. And so that's where my Friday ends. High highs and low lows, I suppose. And again, I don't mean to seem too dramatic about the lens, but it really is an essential part of what I want to do here. And to just lose that in such like a flippant and silly way, it just really broke me down a little bit. And I'm just happy that if I had to break this lens, that I broke it on like a medieval cart path. Like, that's kind of cool, I guess. But anyways, that's all I have for my Friday adventures. Tomorrow, I'm in Alba for the market. Back to Alba. Maybe that's what this next one will be called, is the return to Alba. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for my 6th day, Saturday, in Italy.